I was born here in Dallas and raised in Fort Worth and Houston. Made my way finally to the University of Texas and was a double major in history and English with a teaching certificate. Then later in life, I went back to school here in Dallas at SMU and received a master's in the liberal studies program, and I had a concentration in art history. I think about 20 years ago was when I first became involved. I was approached to have my house on the home tour, and I was so nervous about it. I resisted the idea, but eventually decided I would proceed, and it ended up being a very rewarding experience. Been involved in writing those articles 10 or 11 years. Well, it's been an interesting venture because after the homes are selected, we set up an appointment with the homeowner, and the tour chairman goes, and the owners take us through their home. We're so fortunate to have all these individuals in the community that open their homes to us and let us take a peek inside. They will discuss the original portions of the house that they left intact, but seeing the transformation of a home that has been sensitively and lovingly remodeled or renovated is really special. So we usually spend a couple of hours at least with the homeowner. They take a look at the article and sign off on it when they're ready. Primarily, they share the information about the home. In some instances, we will have some knowledge, but you have to remember some of the records were lost in a flood in the Highland Park government offices. So that was unfortunate, but often they will have the original plans. They sometimes are unaware of the architect, though, and his reputation and credentials. So often we can add a little bit to their story. As far as architectural styles, they've really followed historical trends. So one style that was very, very prevalent in the 1920s and 1930s is the Tudor style. Over half the homes that were constructed during that time frame were Tudor. Some of these were grand estates and homes, and often they were charming cottages that are in University Park. So many of the architects and homes I'm going to talk about, there will be a preponderance of the Tudor architecture. They're particularly interesting because of all the varied materials, complex masonry, and carpentry that was involved. One example of an exceptional Tudor home would be 4218 Fairfax. Sits on a graceful curve of the street of Fairfax off Preston Road, and it was built by Clyde Griesenbeck in 1929, and I think even today he would still be proud of this particular home. It's had the benefit of wonderful renovations and just only 3 or 4 owners, which often does help in a case of an older home. When the home was on the tour, the couple that was living there were from England, so they had been drawn to the home because of its architectural style, and they lovingly updated the kitchen and bathrooms for their family. But one particular feature that's so wonderful in this home is the dramatic 2-story entry when you first arrive. It has a wonderful staircase, and I could just imagine former owner Dorothy Malone floating down that stairwell. It's a home that's really been the setting for many glamorous parties with Hollywood celebrities. So it has a little history there. Other subsequent owners put in a wonderful mahogany English library that is partitioned, and it has secret hidden closets and window seats. So it's very charming. Then at the back of the home, there was this wonderful 1.5-story hexagonal garden room that viewed the rear grounds. So the home was so special, and people were just raving about it as they came through on the tour. And it's special to be able to offer that type of tour to the community. Well, another jewel in the Tudor crown is definitely 3910 Gillen Avenue. Noted architect Hal Thompson completed this home about 1918. So it's certainly one of our centennial homes that we should celebrate. The rich detail on the outside is just an attention grabber. There are 2 front-facing gables with lots of masonry detail at the front door, which is often accented in English architecture. That's a focus. There's an eyebrow element above the door, and then a visor roof element above that. So there are different window shapes and forms, and there are even some gargoyles that meet you at the front door. The homeowners had done extensive work on this home. They left the main part of the house intact, of course, inside, but you walk into a wonderful black and white marble entry that's oversized, and then they were so happy to have a music room. I think they had 3 or 4 children, and the music room and living room fireplace mantle are really of historical significance because a very famous German woodcarver from Austin, Peter Mansbindel, came up, did the living room mantle, and then he carved a bust of Bach and Beethoven in the music room. And you may say why, but the original owner's wife was the first music director for the Hockaday School for Girls. And there's even a Juliet balcony that he carved on the interior of the home, right there in the music room. It's really special. With all those windows, people often think of older homes as being dark and dreary, but the windows bring in all this light. This particular family had a wonderful art collection, some abstract, some representational, but it showed up beautifully on the walls with all the light. The den they redid, and it had this fabulous vaulted, spiraling, conical ceiling that was just very, very special, with special wood that was selected by the architect. And then the views to the exterior were just really special. People raved over this Tudor as they came through. And several bedrooms, all the rooms were generously proportioned, even every bedroom. This Tudor, like several of our older homes, has wonderful mature trees that really frame the home, and that's part of preservation. We've got to remember that these trees provide an irreplaceable canopy and make such a difference. So that was another aspect of that particular home. The third Tudor I would like to speak about was built by Fouché and Cheek, architects of Highland Park Village. They completed this Tudor in 1929, and it is still in its original state as far as the exterior facade. And since it is in that state, it's just a wonderful panorama of all the craftsmanship and detail that Tudors can have. The focus at the front door has 5 series of raked bricks that just really taper down to the front door and accentuate it in such a beautiful way. They've used Roman arches, Gothic arches, and there is still that wonderful original oak front door with its stained glass panels. There's an unusual element in this particular Tudor. It has this very prominent oriel window above the entry that draws people's interest and eye. In fact, it's almost overwhelming to the human eye to take all the different elements in, the different window sizes, columns, etc. But it is a beautiful exterior facade. Of course, slate roof too, as is on many of the Tudors. Once inside, you see what a wonderful job these homeowners have done in preserving all of the original wood textures, and they have added on and modernized in such a sensitive way. Of course, they had the handiwork of a local person that was very skilled in these types of projects. You know, the one thing I haven't touched on a little bit is adventures in remodeling, some of which are nightmares, but most of them end up in a rewarding way. For these homeowners, they said they were totally blown away when they pulled up the lime carpet and linoleum, and beneath they had these wonderful oak floors with walnut pegs. I mean, who knew? They had no idea they would be blessed with that type of surprise. Another feature in this home that is amazing is the fact that the stairwell, which is in a central position, is framed by a turret. And often the turrets are on the front of the homes, but in this case, it's very understated and they're in the middle of the house, which brings me to the rear exterior of this home. Often in construction, and rightfully so, I'm sure, because of price, etc., the builders would back off of doing much detail or creativity in the rear. This home from front to back is just as beautiful. All of the stone and detailing is right back there, along with the beautiful turret. Again, this home has the benefit of magnificent trees, and those just are a blessing for Texans, because what a relief from the heat, and especially our electric bills. One last Highland Park home I would like to talk about is at 4311 Arcady Avenue. It is just as romantic and magical as you can see from the exterior. It's a French chateau-esque home. Architect was George Marble, who often partnered with Charles Dilbeck, who was another iconic architect in our community. And Dilbeck was known for his eclectic style, architectural style. He would focus on French Norman accents. He loved timbering and throwing in a large fireplace here and a cozy little room. But in this instance, George Marble took those elements, and so on the front of the house you can see the wonderful, there are two Juliet balconies, and they have heavy timbering. The roof alone is a marvel, with all the undulations of the windows and different treatments there. So there's a lot of architectural interest. But what stretches the imagination is that this was a spec home by Dines and Craft in 1937. It's just hard to believe that a spec home would look like this, a small castle. It's truly a beautiful home inside. It has a soaring entry there with the turret, lots of architectural detail. There's a giant solarium on the back of the house that has wonderful views of the pool and lovely views of the guest house and cabana. These particular homeowners have repurposed and reimagined some of the rooms and spaces for the way they live. So some of the formals have been converted for their own use and showcasing collections, and it's just been a marvelous idea for their family. So the ceiling heights upstairs for some of the bedrooms are just exceptional. I think this house is truly a study in scale and proportion and demonstrates what remarkable things can be done when you renovate. Transitioning over to University Park, I want to highlight some of the special homes there. There's a great deal of Georgian architecture in University Park, along with lots of charming Tudor cottages and other styles. Sadly, we have lost many of these Tudor cottages, but there's still many that you can see. And of course, I've just touched on that Tudor style in Highland Park. There was a wave of Georgians also built in the 80s and 90s, but what I want to focus on is a beautiful example of a renovated 1930s home at 3504 Hanover. This home does have the benefit of a wonderful interior designer who had the vision to save it and renovate the interior. So as you can see, has very clean lines. She elected to paint the house white, and the white surround at the door gives it a modern flair. One of her prompts was her love of California, so she extended the veranda across the front of the home, and on the east end, she has some mid-century tub chairs with a table. So it's very inviting. Her influence is seen from the curb all the way to the back alley. It's just a very special home, the way it has changed. So inside, on that east end, is one of the best man caves I've ever seen. She constructed this area for her husband, and then he can exit to the front if he wants to enjoy a cigar or whatever. For her, there's an area where they added on, and she has beautiful 9-foot antique doors that open up into her resource room and the area where she prepares all of her work drawings, filled with art throughout. The home has a wonderful center hall plan, and there's easy access to the formals as well as the family area. Beautiful pool in the back, and I just can't say enough about the remarkable way she transformed this home. Everyone on the tour thought it was special. To wrap up the homes in University Park, I want to speak about possibly the most iconic home there. It is an elegant neoclassical home, and it's the oldest remaining home in University Park. It was built in 1914 through 1916 by Bishop Edward Mouzon, who was one of the founders of SMU. Actually, this part of University Boulevard was known as Professors Row for years because so many professors lived in close proximity to the university. When Bishop Mouzon retired or sold the home, he transferred ownership to SMU. And at this point, this wonderful home had to survive a life of being a fraternity house, a sorority house, and a boarding house. So in 1962, the Wise family rescued this house from an uncertain fate and bought it to raise their family there. There's a little bit of uncertainty in the history after they sold it, but great fortune and fate intervened, and a member of that family loved growing up there, and he and his wife purchased it in 2012 and took on a 2-year renovation that has brought it up to just an amazing condition. Their goal was a bit of a challenge. They wanted to retain all the classical elements in the home and then merge that with a modern sensibility for just current way people live. So it's just a bright white glittering interior that matches the exterior. The rooms are cut on a very generous proportion. They're the formals, but the way they have redone the spaces makes it very, very livable. The symmetry of this house is also exquisite. There are wonderful views to the rear, and the way they positioned the guest house is just a perfect companion for the structure. So we're just very fortunate that this original vintage home is still with us. One thing I'd like to point out is I've spoken about certain architects and architectural styles, but actually we've had several homes on our tour with many of the other wonderful stylistic motifs in our community. We've had wonderful Italian Renaissance masterpieces, cottages. We had Harlan Crow's grand home. So whether large or small, we celebrate our history through architecture. I think I should mention again Charles Dilbeck and his contributions to our area. He built many, many homes, not only in the Park Cities, but in Dallas. Unfortunately, we've lost many of them, but they are very distinctive and very eclectic because of his use of a variety of materials. Charles Dilbeck actually owned and worked in a lumber yard for years. His father was in that business. So he really was a master carpenter, and his homes are very special. We had one on the tour last year, 2023, and it is one of the four that are at the intersection of Shenandoah and Douglas, known as the Four Sisters. That's truly a shrine to Charles Dilbeck. He was very unique and special. One other architect who is certainly preeminent in our community is Hal Thompson. And I do want to mention his iconic home he built for himself on Potomac. He built this in 1921, just before he got married, and it's a colonial revival home, which conjures up images of father of the bride and just the quintessential American home. It's a white clapboard home, complete with a white picket fence in front. It has two wings that jut out from the main structure, and the symmetry of those two rooms is magical. Got the living room and the dining room, and this is a home that's also enjoyed a life and could tell many stories. The owners of Potomac were close friends of the founder of Williams-Sonoma. So their kitchen has been the site for wonderful dinner parties and lots of entertaining. The winding driveway to this home goes back to a beautiful two-story guest house work space used as an office. It's just a very special home in our community. So with the passage of time, I think we have to realize, our group, Preservation Park Cities, realizes that many of the homes that seemed so modern and contemporary a few years back will also be in the mix to be considered for landmarking. And that is part of our mission. We use the appropriate criteria, national standards dictate some of this, to landmark significant homes in our community that have not received alterations. We also have a renovation landmarking medallion. But back to these modern homes, just thinking, once a home is 50 years old, then it could be considered. And we have a body of work by several significant architects that were active from 1950 on. O'Neill Ford, Frank Welch, the Oglesby Group, just to mention a few. So we in no way, and Howard Meyer actually, we in no way are discounting all those contributions to the community. I think my experience has been with the home tour that Preservation Park Cities has. It's been an experience of advocacy for our community, recognizing these architectural gems that people may drive by and not notice. We celebrate that, and we also celebrate the work that some of these local residents have gone to, the exercises, the researching of materials and components to try to keep their house true to its heritage. All of those things go into our tour. We also are one of the only tours, if not the only, that has docents in each room. So we have these docents that are in each room pointing out information so that the tour goers really get a background and a history of each residence that we focus on that year. One year on the tour, it was interesting to share a story of a young couple who took their house back to the studs. As they opened up the walls, they discovered artwork and posters from another era. They also found personal letters and documents and diaries from families that had lived there. So it became a real adventure for them, and then they shared it with our tour. This young couple elected to make a time capsule of some of the elements they found in the walls and framed it. They put it in their dining room. It was a real conversation piece. And then with the documents that they found in the walls, they were able to go back and locate other people that had lived in the home, family members, and they reached out to them and were able to share things that these folks were totally unaware of. So it became a real generational situation in this home that they were able to reach back through the years and connect people. So in closing, I want to share a quote from the late Virginia Savage McAllister. She wisely said, "Few things affect us more directly or often than our built environment." I find that so powerful, especially in our community where success has allowed people to make decisions that aren't perhaps always the right one when it comes to our visual history and landscape. Often when a home disappears, it can actually negatively affect an entire block. And people will drive by and notice this difference. And they'll notice that having removed a tree that was 100 years old has also changed the entire landscape. So these are things we really need to think critically about. There's certainly a place for preserving our visual history, and we really celebrate those owners that understand that. On the flip side of this coin, there really can be happy new beginnings and endings for these special homes. Our purpose is really to celebrate and honor our architectural history and the architects themselves, as well as the owners of these homes that have made it possible. I find really that there's just endless imagination and creativity by some of these homeowners to take their vintage home to the next level, make it current and modern and wonderful. I really want to continue writing love letters to these homes and not obituaries.